Well, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today. It's quite a broad stage, so I'm going to move backwards and forwards a little bit in the hope that no one feels completely left out of the auditorium. I'm going to talk about three things that really matter to me. My three passions. One is data. Two, as Matt has kindly already introduced, is the idea of innovating, moving forward, doing new things. And the third is my personal passion, which is encouraging women to aim a bit higher in careers. And obviously coming from the data science world, this audience is particularly close to my heart and close to my own experience. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And I hope that doesn't alienate the men in the room, because obviously the discussion is about how, you know, we both work optimally and create teams of collaboration across the industry. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk a little bit about my history with dunnhumby, and then I'm going to share with you 7 things that I have found to be my guiding principles in creating successful businesses and working successfully with businesses. And that will be private sector businesses and also government. So I hope that embraces the interest in the room. So where do we start? So my title is all about winning in a data-driven world, and I passionately believe businesses who use data well will win over businesses that still rely on instinct and experience, which is how so many businesses work today. And the fear factor of how much is changing at the moment means that using data can de-risk so many things. And so your skills, your capabilities become even more important in the world today. So before I explain what I think about the future, I'd like to just take you on a very quick journey of you know, how we've arrived at the place we are. Although I've been working a long time, I wasn't working in the 50s. I'd just like to point that out as we go. But the 50s and, you know, classifying people by their job is still very much here in the world today. You are the job you are your social classification. People will still target on ABC1 25 to 44-year-olds. God knows why, but they do. And so a lot of the industry still works like that, but that's kind of the old way. Clive Humby and I pioneered You Are Where You Live geodemographics. We worked at a business called CACI, developed something called Acorn. That was the early incarnation of what then became Mosaic. We worked with Richard Webber, who went on to create Mosaic at Experian. And so, you know, we're still excited about the idea of geospatial data. I think there's a resurgence, and I think there's a lot of room for that to be the next powerful thing, because it's the most wonderful way of combining digital data with analog data. And so I might say a bit more about that. The 1990s, the whole Tesco era for us was very much about you are what you buy. You know, you're defined, if you like, by what you eat, and that became a very powerful translator. And the journey we've come back, so we sold dunnhumby in 2011 to Tesco, and we've come back because we're interested in the next part of the journey, and we believe the next part of the era is very much about you are the passions you have. So your passions for music, for sport, whatever they might be, are stronger and more compelling than your passion for brands. Because much as the brands would love us to be passionate about them, we're not. And so it's really important, we feel, to understand people's passions. So the journey, I'm not going to say a lot on this because it's a journey that's been well described, but back in 1995, we kicked off Club Card with Tesco, such an exciting era. This was at a time when technology was very expensive. People were throwing data away because they couldn't afford to hold it. So the revolution that we created with Tesco was the idea that if you keep it and use it, you can understand customers better. And by understanding them, you can become a more engaged business in their life. And, you know, some very, very big principles there. Everybody knows about statements and Club Card, but very few people realize that it actually drove the creation of a bank, that it ended up creating a brand, Finest, that took share from Marks and Spencer's, massive share, and became actually a bigger brand than Coca-Cola in the UK. So phenomenal. And, you know, a whole range of things were all driven from the data. And the real revolution was being able to capture that. And at the time, we had to use statistical modeling because we took some of the data, some of the time, because no technology at the time could take all of the data all of the time. So the principles that you maybe don't need to use quite so much today because computing's caught up in such a big way were very fundamental at this time. Did it matter? Was it important? Well, you know, a couple of exciting things here. Ian McLaurin was really instrumental in, I suppose, opening up at that board meeting where we presented our findings and saying these now, I think, certainly immortal words to us, which is, you know more about my customers after 3 months than I know after 30 years. That was probably one of the most special moments in my life, because at that point he opened the door and said, help us, which, you know, it is really one of those moments where everything changes. What was that worth? What was that moment of saying, I don't know, I need help worth? Well, over the following 10 years, we created with Tesco something like £60 billion worth of uplift. So data is valuable. Data is strategic. We also work with Kroger in the US. I understand there are a few Americans in the room, which is fantastic. We work with Kroger. Kroger probably embraced data and data science and the technology we worked on even better than Tesco. Rodney McMullen, who's the Kroger Chief Executive Officer now, at the time it was Dave Dillon, basically put customers first. When they did reports to the market, they never mentioned customers. At the time we started working with them. After we worked with them, they were mentioned in every conversation. And the value created, well, 44 quarters of straight growth from the moment we started work with them. So at the time, they were being killed by Walmart, really killed by Walmart. They defended against Walmart and have done very, very well since. There's a new giant on the corner now, as we all know, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The Kroger journey, similarly, was exciting. We started in 2002. We changed everything from pricing to how loyalty was viewed. We would range according to data. It's called assortment in America. And you can see the journey. I'm not going to go into all of it, but many years and many changes based on the data that was created. So phenomenally exciting. So that's where we learned so much. It's where data science began. But the thing I want you to consider at this point is all of that was historic data. The great thing about grocery is we are creatures of enormous habit. We like the same butter, we like the same toothpaste, we like the same washing up liquid, right? So we're creatures of enormous habit. But when we buy luxuries, when we buy cars, when we take holidays, we're not. We like, little changing it up a little bit. And so predicting what people are going to buy is very hard. The analytics that we are still learning in universities today are like driving a car purely on the rear view mirror, which is a bit risky, right? So it's worth thinking about. That is what is taught. That is what we do when we analyze customer data. So what we're excited about doing is, well, how do you know what people are going to do? And how can you find data that gives signals of intent rather than evidence of past behavior? And that's what excites me today. So I want to talk a little bit about the future of data science. I hope you're going to ask some questions at the end, and I'm going to try and talk a bit faster so that I allow you to ask some questions at the end. The thing that strikes me that is so critical here is that, if we take the great Charles Darwin, he saw it all before. It's not the most intellectual of the species or the strongest of the species that survives, but it's the one that learns to adapt most. And so it's about adaptation. It's about embracing change. There was a fantastic article in the FT this weekend in the magazine, which is all about change and why we don't like it. And it's really worth looking at if you haven't had a chance to already. We don't like change, but adapting to change is what's going to make us win. And so we have to learn and understand that data is the pulse, it's the life pulse. And, we hear about, data is the oil. Can you imagine an engine without oil running through it all of the time? But most businesses extract data as a one-off. They don't have it running through them for all their decision making. And that, for me, is what's going to give them the edge. So data helps us understand customers. We have to understand customers because if we don't, bad things can happen, right? So, all of these brands came in and disrupted, not because in essence they were doing bad things, but customers didn't like late fees. They didn't like fare control, okay? And so what we have to think about is following customers tell us how to win. And so that honest feedback that you as analysts and scientists and technologists give is the truth that companies have to embrace. And that's sometimes a bitter pill for them to swallow. Lots of technology coming through, robots, voice commerce, agile retail, fast delivery, the last mile, all of these things we're hearing about. One of the ones I'm excited about is Store of the Future, experiential stores, which is what do millennials expect from their brand experiences right now? And I think, I have a 27 and a 24-year-old. And, they expect a lot when they spend money now. And they care more about experiences than they care about stuff. So this is why the high street's struggling. Because people don't need to go to the high street anymore to buy stuff. They go to the high street to look at Apple and to worship at the temple of Apple. And that's why the stores look like hotels and, I can't even think what they look. They're quite intimidating, actually, when you're not a millennial. But anyway, so it's changing, and there are exciting things happening there. This is the new big dog out there. We used to call Walmart the Death Star. because you have to have an enemy. It helps you focus, it helps you win. These guys are awesome, right? I know Doug Gurr, he runs the UK. I mean, these guys are amazing. Why do they win? Well, this isn't my opinion. This is a lot of analysts, a lot of journalists' opinion. They win because they have more data than anyone else. And when they opened a store in the US, they said, you can't shop with us unless you connect and we get your data. So they know that data is key. The sale is less important than knowing what people are doing and what they want. So what are the challenges? So I wanted to talk, this is just my one slide about government, because I wanted to make sure that for those of you who work in the public sector, understand that everything I say is just as relevant, just as important. If you're the DWP, what are you looking for? You're looking for early interventions. You're looking for indicators of change in lifestyle, behavior. You want to know, are people saving enough? You know, are they going to have big enough pensions in the future? What are they doing about retirement? What happens when they fall sick? What happens if it's long-term illness? Are they returning to work? You know, what does maternity do? Do people return to work? All of these things help them understand how to plan and how to budget for the future. So working out how to get this data in the modern world, you know, this isn't about what's already happened, rear view mirror. This is about what's happening. And so your job, your challenge is, how do we get this? Because we need to know it. So I really like the series Mad Men. I'm sure everybody here has seen it. But what's interesting is Mad Men is from the 50s, right? And who were king of the road back in the 50s? It was the advertising guys. It was the cool, creative idea. But, you know, I think the new heroes, the new rock stars are the math men. And please forgive me, because by math men, I mean math women as well. And I'm going to talk a lot about women, okay? But you are the new rock stars. You're the ones who are in short supply. You're the ones every company is trying to find. So you know, this is why it's such an exciting time and such an exciting era. So I'm now going to share with you very quickly 7 ideas for winning. So there they are. I'll talk about each one. So data is both art and science. I think the thing we must never forget is that data and the science of analytics is very important, but you still have to work out, how do you talk to customers so that they respond with, ooh, this is about me, it's relevant, and it's timely. And so there's very much an art to that, the creative art. You can't just say, these are the facts, get on with it. You've actually got to work collaboratively. So finding out how you communicate all your science with people who don't find that easy but have other skills is really, really important. So that combination of, you know, data is the truth has to be coupled with, so how can we reward people? How can we tempt them? How can we stretch them? How can we do all of those things? That's an art. And so we need friends with other skills. We need to know what we're trying to do. What is it we need? What do we not have that we should have? And so, you know, this is a very underdeveloped skill within businesses. I'm going to talk a little bit about how few businesses have a chief data officer or even a chief customer officer. But, you know, believe me, there are even fewer who have a data strategy. But the truth is, people should know what data they need rather than what data they have. So it's a really important distinction. So I think, having a vision, knowing what capabilities, what solutions are out there, and the roadmap is something that you can guide and you can help them prepare, rather than it just be an ad hoc, well, this is what we're doing today. Second thing is what I talked about before, the idea of, most analytics have all been about the past and very much about functional engagement. What we are now looking at is this emotional engagement, which is intent. What are people's passions? What are their motivations? So that you can understand what they're going to do rather than what they've already done. Retailers have an enormous problem because most of their data, most people that we talk to have lots and lots of customers who've only ever bought once, potentially 2 or 3 years ago. Well, what can you do with that? I mean, you can't, right? They expect you to, they ask you to, but you can't do anything with it. So what you have to work out is how can we know about everyone rather than how can we just focus on the data we have about a few people. That's why everybody always mails the top 10% of customers, because they're the only ones they have any data on, right? So we're here at an open source conference with some of the leading experts in open source technology. But there's open source big data as well. There's so much data out there, and there's a lot more coming. And so this is your opportunity to embrace it. We're looking at social data. We've heard some scary stories about social data, but social data can be a force for good. We work with this data now, 1 billion customers, 30 billion connections. From that, we can identify there are 330,000 things that people care passionately about. It's kind of surprising it's only 330,000 in the world that people care about. That's like brands, sportsmen, musicians, everything. So it's about 10,000 followers. And from that, we can create passions and motivations. So we've created a kind of ontology from all of this data. And what that allows us to do is enhance transaction data. We can take Jessica and Joe, they're both high value, high spend, they both live in New York, but if we add their social profile, this other passions and motivation data, we can see they're fundamentally different. Jessica is a mum, she has children, and she likes all the, political influencers, whereas Joe's completely different. She's a complete fashion-aholic, if there is such a word, and follows all the celebrities and all the style magazines. So they're very, very different. You treat them differently, right? And that's the opportunity. It's another layer. The third thing that we've found really important is this whole area of agility and adaptability. Data is the new oil. It flows fast. It reveals patterns and changes, and we have to keep pace with that. Here's all the data coming. When we started dunnhumby we started dunnhumby before that, but in 1995, people talked about a geyser of data, and no one can drink from a fire hydrant where the geyser. This is the geyser. This is your geyser, right? All this data. People are terrified of it because they know it's coming, but they don't know what to do with it. Lots of it. So the retailers we've heard about, but all the credit card companies, mobile and social, and let's not forget the guys who've created national descriptions and databases. So there's a huge amount. I think one of the things that we've learned is really important is to create a learning culture. Because everything's moving so fast, everybody has to keep learning. So, one of the behaviors, one of the values we look at the most is curiosity, and that sense of I want to learn and keep learning and keep adapting. And so having a learning culture within business and encouraging that, we find, is a real differentiator between winners and losers. We've created an academy within our business. We had an academy at Dunnhumby. It was 1,500 people. And we continuously taught people, because the great thing about anybody in science or technology is you tend to love learning and you learn very, very fast. You are not average. And that is a differentiator for most businesses. You need to keep pace with lots of technical expertise. They keep emerging. Some are the oldies and the goodies, the newies and the goodies. And so, you know, they're all there, and they are exciting. And what they allow you to do is your creativity now. Making sure that data has a place on the board. If people at the top don't get data, it doesn't happen. They don't still today truly understand it, which is why you have digital officers and e-commerce people, because it's a bit like the stuff I don't really get. But that's going to change. So this is what we find. You know, this is how many businesses have chief data officers or chief information officers, or no single point of accountability, or the chief data scientist is it. So, you know, people haven't really made up their mind who owns it yet. And that's something that we need to think about. Very importantly, we see this. Doing nothing for businesses is no longer an option. Legislation is forcing change. GDPR, right, is scaring 99% of businesses. But there's financial service legislation that is forcing change, forcing the banks to know their customers. So this means all of these things are now necessary. So it's a moment of great change. So that's my main talk. I'm going to very briefly, if I may, I hope I've still got a few minutes, talk to you about my other passion, which is the female lead. And what I want to share with you is that as a data scientist, we've looked at what young people love and follow. And by using that social media data, we find that boys, on the whole, love many more things than girls. But it's true, girls, I'm sorry. So boys tend to love everything from sports to politics to gaming to comedians. And when we analyze who follows what on social media, boys have a very diverse portfolio. Ladies, our portfolio, I'm sure you can guess, but I'm afraid it's celebrity and fashion and celebrity. And that's it. So when we look at 1 billion people, and when we look at people in the UK, that is what we see. So what we have done, what I have done, because of my passion, is create this book, which is, you know, a beautiful book of photography with interviews on 60 incredible women. It could have been 5,000 women or 50,000 women, where we tell their stories. And these are all being shared with schools across the UK. So we're already in nearly 5,000 schools. We're reaching 750,000 students, and it's going into, you know, at least double that in the near future. So we're trying to give girls something where they can say, I can see it and I can understand that there are exciting ways to be fulfilled, to be happy, to be successful in the future. So that's what it's all about, because you can't be what you can't see. So you're all role models because you're already in the data science world and the technology world, which is one of the areas where we need more recruits and more women, certainly, because the shortfall of women is acute in your area.
So my ask, please, because we worked with DWP in a similar venue where they had all their very brilliant analysts and technologists. And what I asked is for you to go onto the website after this conference and nominate a school online. And if you nominate a school, they get all of this for free. So none of this costs anything. They get all the films, all the book, all the teaching materials. So please go online, nominate 1, 2, 3, 10 schools. After their conference, we got 50 nominations, which was unbelievable. So if we get anything like that, we'd be delighted. We can also do schools in America as well. So it's UK and America. Please do have a look at that. And then finally, and then I'm going to ask if there's time for questions, I'm also going to mention that every year we do a conference partnership with Women in Data. They're outside today. We do a special collection of women from your industry. And this will be the second year, so we're just about to publish the new awards with them. The conference, I believe, is in November. November, is it 30th or 29th? 29th, thank you, 29th. So very exciting, and all of it is just about, there are amazing women and they do these amazing jobs. And we get letters and emails from schools and from girls saying, thank you, you changed my perception. So that makes me very, very excited and very proud. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope that has given you some food for thought.